Hi everyone, this is William from the Headphone Experience. I'm here tonight with my first impressions of a new headphone amp, and please excuse me if I pronounce this wrong. I'm not sure. I actually watched a few other videos from other reviewers to find out how they pronounced it, and I don't think they were sure either. So anyway, I'm not sure if the X is silent or if it's pronounced, but other people did pronounce it with the X. So anyway, this is the Singxer, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, SA-1, and this is a headphone amp and preamp combination. And this was loaned to me by APOS Audio for review, and it currently sells through APOS for $599 US. This is a fully balanced Class A amp. It has 5 analog outputs, which would be on the rear you have your preamp outputs. One set is RCA single-ended and the other set is XLR balanced, and then you have 3 headphone outputs on the front, which includes a 6.3 millimeter single-ended, a 4.4 millimeter balanced, and a 4-pin XLR balanced headphone output. And then it has 2 analog inputs, both on the rear, and that would be your RCA single-ended and XLR balanced inputs. This unit also has 2 gain settings, and that's done by flipping some switches on the bottom of the amp. I'll show you here. You've actually got 4 switches, and all 4 have to be switched at the same time, and you've got a choice of low or high gain. And so far, reviewing this, I've used high gain on this, and I've just left them there. It is a little difficult to get to these on the bottom, but it's not the first amp that I've seen gain controls on the bottom. That is, it happens once in a while. It'd be nicer if they were on the front, but in just 1 switch instead of 4, but I guess there's probably a reason for this. So anyway, this amp also has a switch, and this one is on the front, and it's called high Z or low Z. And what that's for is based on the impedance of your headphones. If you have a high impedance headphone, like say 300 ohms or 600 ohms, then you're going to want to use the high Z output. And then if you're using a low impedance headphone like 20 ohms, 32 ohms, I'm not sure where the switchover is, but I have found out that any planar headphone I've used, the planar magnetic drivers, that works better with the low Z setting on this, and I will talk about that a little bit more in a minute. The specs listed on this claim a signal-to-noise ratio of 126 decibels, a dynamic range of 147 decibels, and a total harmonic distortion of 0.0001%. The power ratings on this, and I didn't see a separate set of power ratings for balanced and single-ended outputs, and these would be your headphone outputs. And I noticed that some people assume they're the same, but I don't think that's the case from experimenting with this with different headphones. There seems to be significantly less power from the single-ended 6.3 millimeter output, so I don't think it's anywhere near, because the balanced output seems to have a lot of power, and the ratings according to the specs are 6.4 watts per channel into 32 ohms, which is very powerful, and I don't doubt that. 2 watts per channel into 120 ohms, or 380 milliwatts into 600 ohms. The size of this unit is 9.2 inches wide. It is 6.6 inches deep front to back and 1.8 inches tall. It weighs 3.9 pounds, and for the size of this, it actually feels very substantial. This thing has some pretty good weight to it, and the enclosure or the chassis of this is all aluminum. I'll roll up here a little closer, try to give you a closer look at this, and we'll start with the front. On the front, first of all, you've got your power on and off light, and that lights up blue, but I think it lights up a different color, like red or something, if there's some sort of problem. And then you've got your off, your preamp output and your headphone output. You can't use them both at the same time. You're either going to have headphones or preamp output on this, depending on the switch. And then you've got your input switch here for RCA or XLR, and then this is your high Z, low Z. And it depends on the headphones. Some headphones it makes very little difference. Other headphones it makes a large difference. Then you got your headphone jacks here. We'll start out with your 4.4 millimeter balanced, your 6.3 millimeter single ended, and your 4-pin XLR balance. And then you've got your volume knob here, which feels really smooth. It's easy. You know, it doesn't. It's not touchy or anything. It's just nice and smooth. You know, varies the volume with. It's very linear, you know, it doesn't jump, you know, at the beginning or at the end or whatever. So nice volume control on it. Like I showed you earlier, you got your gain settings on the bottom. And then on the rear, you have this side is your inputs. You've got your RCA inputs and your XLR inputs. Then you've got your preamps out, your RCA outputs and your XLR outputs. Then you've got your main power switch here. So what you do is usually you leave this on and then turn the unit on and off from the front. So basically leaves it in standby, and then you turn it from either off to or preamp or headphone amp on the front. And then you've got your AC input here, your 120 volt input, and it does come with a power cable. To do my review so far, and this is just my first impressions, I've had this about a week or so. Actually, I think about a week and a half, but I've just been really busy with work, and normally I try to get my reviews out, or my first impression out in a few days, but it's been about a week and a half, and I have listened to this several times with several different headphones, but so far, my input source has been CD transport running a digital signal to the DAC, and the DAC I've been using primarily would be the Topping D70S, and that would be the MQA version, and that's a DAC that I really like. It's got a nice warm, very smooth sound, and I actually prefer it to the more expensive Topping D90. But anyway, I've been using that primarily, and I did real quick try the Topping E30 DAC, which the D70 has a warm, almost R2R DAC type of sound to it, and I wanted to try the E90 or the E30 just because it's a little bit drier, more analytical sounding, to get an idea of how this amp sounded. So anyway, basically my first impressions is it has a slightly warm of neutral sound, and I actually like that quite a bit. I'm just lately, I haven't been into really analytical, super detailed sounds. I like a warmer, slightly warmer, not muddy, not, you know, rolled off, not dark, but I've been looking for, I like amps with a slightly warmer mid-range, amp stacks, headphones, everything, and this does. It has a slightly warm of neutral sound, not drastic. I definitely noticed that with the D70, but even with the E30, which is a very neutral DAC, it still had that slightly warm of neutral sound to it. And actually, you know, like I said, it's really nice. I really like the sound. It has, you know, sort of a rich, definitely not dry and definitely not analytical sound, but yet the detail is very good. I'm very impressed with the detail, the resolution. It comes across as very clean, and but I would say the balanced outputs more so than the single-ended. There is a difference in the sound between the balanced headphone outputs and the single-ended, and to me they do sound slightly better, a little more detailed, a little bit bigger sound stage. Not that the single-ended output is bad, but it's just not quite as good. And then as far as power, the balanced outputs seem to put out plenty of power for any headphone I have. Everything from high impedance headphones to hard to drive planar magnetic headphones. And the two that I have that are the hardest to drive would be the Hi-Fi-Man HE560 and the Hi-Fi-Man 400 SE. That's the HE400 SE. Excuse me just a second. Anyway, this unit drives both of those very well from the balanced output, but I did want to mention something I've already discovered with this. The single-ended output, the HE560, which I think is a 50 ohm headphone, and pretty hard to drive. It takes a lot of power to make that sound good. This amp does not do well from the single-ended output. It does great from the balanced output with that headphone, but does not do well for some reason with that headphone. That's the Hi-Fi-Man HE560 from the 6.3 millimeter output. First of all, just to get up to like normal listening level, I'm at like 1 o'clock on the volume knob, and to get into fairly loud, I'm at like 3 o'clock. And that headphone just sounds really flat, really lacking bass. And the bass that it does have is muddy, and it has no dynamics, no impact. And I've actually got other amps that are only rated at like 1.2 watts or 1.25 watts, something like that, that actually drive this a lot better. And I've got a tube amp, the Waveborn Edelweiss 3 Power Amp Plus, which is rated at 3 watts per channel, that just drives circles around this headphone, you know, from using the 6.3 millimeter output on this. Like I said, that from the balanced output, it does an excellent job with that headphone. But for some reason, from the 6.3, it just cannot drive that headphone well. The HE400 SE, which is also hard to drive, it does a little bit better, but still sounds lacking, like it's just not producing enough current. And I did want to mention the high Z, low Z switch, because that is the headphone, the Hi-Fi-Man HE400, that it makes a huge difference. If it's on high Z, that headphone has no bass and just sounds really bad, but if I switch it to low Z, it sounds much better and has much stronger bass and much more dynamic. With some other headphones, it makes very little difference, and with the 300 ohm ZMF Atrium, it does make a slight difference, and putting it on high Z actually seems to tighten up the bass a little bit and make it sound a little bit better. Gives it a little bit more bass, a little bit more weight to it. But back to the power output, I also tried the single-ended 6.3 headphone output with the Hi-Fi-Man Sundara and the Hi-Fi-Man Edition XS, which are both kind of medium, hard to drive, not super hard to drive, but they do need some power. And it seemed to do pretty well with those. It seemed to be sufficient with both of those headphones from the single-ended output, but for some reason, and I do realize the HE560 is hard to drive, but it just does not have the current or something available that's needed to drive that headphone, and just does not do well from the single-ended output. But like I said, it does do real well from the balanced output. This thing seems to be able to drive any headphone I throw at it from the balanced output. So if you've got a hard to drive headphone, if you're looking at this amp, you're definitely going to want to use the balanced outputs, either the 4.3 or 4.4 millimeter or the 4-pin XLR. Besides from that, like I said, I've only had this about a week. I'm not going to go much deeper into the sound, other than it does sound really good to me. and I did a very brief comparison. I usually don't do much comparing when I do my first impressions video, but a very brief comparison to the Audio GD Master 9 and Audio GD R8 DAC stack. So I compared that stack to this stacked with the topping D70S MQA, and this actually has a very similar sound. It's not quite on the level of that stack, but that's about 3 times the price, 2.5, 3 times the price. But it does have a similar sound, a similar warm, smooth, very pleasant sound. It just doesn't have quite the detail, quite the sound stage, quite the depth, the layering. But like I said, that stack costs about 3 times the price, but it takes you probably 80 or 90% of the way there. And this actually, like I said, I did try this stacked with the topping D70 with the ZMF Atrium, and it did sound really good. It had a really nice sound. So if you have a headphone like that, a 300 ohm high impedance headphone, this seems to work really well. So far, I'm very impressed with this, besides from the one issue, and that's it seems to be lacking enough current to drive hard-to-drive planers from the single-ended output, the 6.3 millimeter. Other than that, I'm very impressed by the sound, and it has plenty of power from the balanced output, so I don't think that's going to be an issue with any headphone. I don't have the Hi-Fi Man HE6, which I really need to get one of those someday, but it's just not my budget, which is pretty much the hardest headphone on the planet to drive. But until then, the HE560 is my hardest to drive, and that's my power test for most amps. But like I said, I am very impressed with this so far. It has a really nice sound. It seems to be well worth the asking price of $599, and it pairs really well with the topping DAC. And I'm going to try to get back to you in a few weeks. It'll probably be more like a month because this is my busy season at work. But I'm going to try to try this with a couple of other DACs. I'm going to try some other headphones, some other planar headphones, see how they all work. And so far, just the one headphone has really been a problem. But, you know, and just throw some more listening time in on this and get back to you with the full review. So anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. Once again, this is William from the Headphone Experience. If this video has helped you, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And the Headphone Experience on Facebook is up to about 16,500 members. You're all welcome to join us over there. Once again, thanks for watching my video.